the real journey of architecture is more, I was good at maths, I was good at social sciences, and then I was like, I'd never done art before, and I was like, okay, let's explore. So it was a little bit of personal hubris, I would argue, was how I got into architecture. But I struggled to understand architecture, I have to be honest, for maybe 2.5 years at school, at university. I was really struggling to understand. I couldn't understand, the beauty of Mies van der Rohe and the wall, and I was like, okay, but what does this really mean? A circular window or a rectangular window, what does this really mean? And it was really a moment that a professor of mine, Professor Helena Webster, sort of asked me to write an essay on the future of the city, that it really transformed me because it sort of made the city and the role of architecture being related deeply to what it means to be human. And when you look at it at the city scale, you realize actually the city is all about unlocking the capacity of what it means to be human. And that was a breakthrough moment for me, because suddenly then I could see the role of architecture wasn't about architecture, it was about unlocking the capacity of being human in new formats. And what does it imagine to be human? So this was a moment where it started to make sense, like the window we're sitting next to provides the kind of natural light right now. And it's working like an artificial light, the way it's positioned with the camera and everything else. And for me, this is what, and the nature of the light, the nature of the care, the position people sit in, they create theories of power, or they create theories of relationship, they create theories of care. So if I'm looking down at the camera, I'm also creating a theory of power and authority. Or if I'm looking straight into the camera, I'm creating a form of care and recognizing this is not some, I don't know it all, I think. I think what we've been doing is discovering and learning and being in relationship to that stuff. And I think that's what's beautiful about architecture. It's a kind of invitation to really learn what it means to be human and creating environments, to be human. And I think the final point for me is just, the reality is we as humans, obviously, and other people have quoted this better, we as humans create our environments and our environments create us. There's a reciprocal dialogic relationship of our co-evolution, and we're co-evolving with our environments. And that's a pretty extraordinary thing for us as a species, that we are in this co-evolved relationship. We're not just evolving biologically, we're co-evolving with our environment. And that was just like I'd opened a Pandora's box of understanding, and it was extraordinary. So that's really been my journey. I have to say, I didn't come at it from the idea of visual beauty and the perfect line or the perfect square. I didn't get it, or any other kind of perfect geometry. They're like, whatever, what does it matter to me? I think what I did discover was, I think my frustration with architecture became more that architectural theory was impressionistic. It was creating quasi-impressions of itself. And I ended up reading outside architectural theory to actually reground. So whether it's Manuel Castells on sociology, or whether it's on network cities, or Manuel de Landa, or if you want to talk about Professor Elizabeth Harold on care, or Kate Rayworth on new economies of thinking, what I found is that actually and architecture is a synthesis discipline. It's design for me is different from management. Management is about conserving and managing the present. Design for me is about synthesizing the necessary and the new. And so our ability to work with these disciplines and other knowledges and to fuse them and to create landscapes, diffusing and creating new possibilities is a key role for architecture and design as a whole. So for me, there was a kind of problem of I think architecture becoming a self-referential landscape as opposed to actually being a synthesis landscape. And then being able to understand, if you understand, human biology or the conceptions that we're working with are challenging because, I spoke a little bit earlier on today about philosophically, you would argue that the last 400 years has been rooted on an idea of the world. And that idea has been rooted on seeing ourselves as individuals, seeing myself as distinct from you, distinct from the world. That separation theory was a key part of the Enlightenment and the last 400 years of the revolution that we've been in the middle of. That separation also permitted violence. That separation also created theories of perspective. That separation also created classification theory. That separation also created the idea of dominion over the world. That separation also created theories of property. So we've constructed a worldview, and that worldview is manifested through our architecture and theories of property, theories of labor, theories of contract. And when you start to look at it, I think there's a very interesting moment when all those worldviews are melting and being reimagined. And so this is a moment where actually we can redesign not just the implied logics of the world, we can go deep into the system. And that's a really, really interesting moment we're in the middle of. So I do think architecture becomes self-referential in terms of its kind of comprehension of self. And I think there has to be, and I think we're part of a process of actually becoming more open and actually recognizing we sit at the intersection of disciplines, and our ability to, and those disciplines aren't just construction, and they're not just engineering. They're human, social, economic, institutional, standards, technological disciplines, our theories of technology, all these things, and we live at the intersection of them. And that to me is a really interesting moment for architecture. And I would talk about architecture as being the machine, it's a human-machine environment synthesis landscape. How do human-machine environments sort of coexist, and what's the co-evolution of those environments? For me, my journey here has been, is rooted in my history, no doubt about it. I mean, I think one of the fascinating things about Sikhism for me is that Sikhism, for example, the Langar Hall, which is every Gurdwara will have a Langar Hall. In the Langar Hall, everyone sits down on the floor and eats. Now, symbolically, what that is an idea that whether you're a king, whether you're a CEO, whether you're somebody who cooks food, you all eat at a level ground. This act of humanizing everyone, I think, is actually, and putting us all in parity with each other, is a really powerful symbolic piece of exercise. And it's symbolic, but also a structural piece of exercise of how we understand ourselves. So for me, there's been just a kind of very deep journey about how do we create environments that we democratize our capacity to make the world around us. Not only democratize the world around us, but democratize how we make architecture. And my experience has been really, I was in an architectural practice which was 7 people. And when we were 7 people, we were designing handrails with nodules in them, right? Because tactile memory is one of the last memories to go. But when that same practice was maybe 70 people, we were designing colored facades. Because in order to retain control, your theory of control actually at 70 was actually about the object and the color codification of the object. Because that was the only thing you could imprint and control at 70. So the question was that if you have a way of organizing design, which is based on a theory of control, then you have this reductive capacity of actually what design is. And that means the idea of the hero designer always produces, in my view, a reductive theory of the possibility of environments, because it has to create this parametric module, which then cascades and controls everything through. And yes, you can synthesize what I would call or extrapolate some theory of craft by using computational frameworks to make every space look slightly variant because there's a computational algorithm, but it's not actual craft. It's not actual care of what that light is into that landscape. So that is imprinted in the nature of the organism you design. It's not an architectural function. The architecture function of the world that you see, I think you can see the organism that designed that in the architecture you produce. So if you're living in an architectural company or organism which is about command and control, you will build a very particular type of architecture. If you're looking to unlock the full capacity of everyone in a team, you will design very different architecture. And this is, I think, something that really imprinted on me, that actually the nature of the organisms you build the architecture. And if you want to democratize the capacity, it is not just about democratizing the capacity of the people that inhabit in a building or even co-make that building, but actually it's also transforming what it means to be an architectural organization. And this applies not only to architecture, but let's expand the theory for a moment. By controlling everything, we also reduce the craft of the craftsperson in the room. So if we control the brick and we control the brick pattern and we've basically reduced the person on the ground who's actually constructing that to an instructable bad robot. So we've destroyed their capability to actually co-create with us. So what does it mean to unlock the full capacity of the system to actually create is, I think, a really important sort of ideal that we need to be working for. And that demands that not only do we change the nature of architecture, it demands we change the nature of the organisms we build in architecture. And it also demands the environments we create that democratize that capability. And that was a really important part of the journey that we were on. And I think it's important if we really talk about democracy in the 21st century. Democracy in the 21st century is not just the vote. It's about our capacity to make society together. And that requires new forms of organizing, which I think are now available to us, and new ways of organizing. I think we're living at the end where command and control as a theory of organizing is any longer efficient. It's no longer efficient. It's not even a moral debate for me. It's no longer efficient. So in a thesis where command and control is no longer efficient and you need to unlock the capacity for everyone, I think we're living in a different economy. And that, to me, requires us to think about every aspect of architecture and how we construct ourselves. So in a complex emergent system, logics are situational. I think universality is a function of not understanding the situational or the complex. Now, what that means is architecture and the transformation of Denmark will be fundamentally different to the architecture and transformation of Ghana or India. And I think that is entirely right. And the reality is, if you look at Kate Raworth's work, she talks beautifully, I think, and articulates totally that many of us, including myself, are living in maldeveloped economies. Not developed, but maldeveloped economies, where our material consumption and material waste is just unbelievable. So, Scandex, we're here in Copenhagen, has the highest material consumption per capita in the world. We look green, we look nice, it's all clean, white, aesthetic. But actually there's an invisible vast amount of waste and vast amount of material consumption, a shadow to this cleanliness. And I think, so our journey is different and our privileges are different as well. And our pathways are different. So we are going to all have to contribute in different ways in making this journey. It's almost clear that as we sit here in Denmark, we are going to have to transform our economy from being rooted in material consumption to intangibles. And this will be first order care, creativity, human services, human discourses, computational capabilities even. And at the same time, we're going to have to shift our material economy to being more durable. We're going to have to make it radically more construction and deconstruction orientated, so there's zero waste. We're going to have to then make it regenerative. That's a full stack transformation. And that's a transformation that we're going to have to do here. Whereas in other parts of the world, it's almost clear that there is just, in the African continent, there's 800 million new people that are arriving. And as a result, there will be great material demand. How do you build the regenerative economy of the 21st century, regenerative cities? That's going to be imagined in Africa, I guarantee you. And this is going to be a whole new, and it's not just, we often fret about, we often talk about the material source. Yes, the material source, but it's also all the invisible stuff, the standards infrastructure, the kind of material logics, the ideas of how you finance regenerative economies, how do you steward regenerative infrastructures. Imagine a building is deeply regenerative. Well, it means that it is systemically maybe producing energy, cleaning water, cleaning air, densifying the soil, increasing biodiversity, has rich microbiome, is regenerative to our bodies in a deep sense as opposed to cathartic and sort of isolated. So if you really look at what the expanded possible space is, it's extraordinary. So I think every place has a journey to go on. Every place will be different to its context. But we are all in a structural transformation of the order of magnitude of the Industrial Revolution was. And the Industrial Revolution, yes, maybe started in the West, but it's consumed the whole world, right? The logic of property exists everywhere. The logic of labor exists everywhere. The logic of objectification exists everywhere. This is not a unique Western theory now, it's a universal theory. So we're seeing a similar scale of transformation that we're in the middle of that will require us to reimagine our material economies, our relationship with the world, our relationship with the planet, going beyond theories of labor, beyond theories of ownership in the way that we've never imagined before. So our energy economy, our food economy, our land use economy, our biomaterial economy, our biodiversity economy, all of these are going to be transformed, and also our human economies. It's very clear that we're in the midst of a vast transformation of the human economy in relationship to machine capabilities. And as mechanical machines unlocked humans from physical labor in some ways, we're going to see a new type of capability. Human cognition won't be about raw computational cognition. It will be about care, complexity, all these richer dynamics that are really critical. So, I would argue that Jurgen Klopp, I'm a Liverpool fan, is probably one of the most extraordinary managers of the 21st century, because he's not just managing Liverpool are massively computationally driven, but his contribution is also about massive emotional intelligence, unlocking the capacity and care and creativity and the full capability of a team. This is about the new human capabilities. Machine-assisted, but new human capabilities. And I think that's a new human economy that we're witnessing at the front ends of that reality. And so I think we're in the midst of a structural transformation. That transformation will be global, planetary, but it will all be situationally different. So the reason why we ended up using the word dark matter was because what became apparent to us is the physical world that we see is a functions of rules, standards, norms, ideas around us. So, whether it's simple things as standards, so whether it is shape of a window, function of standards, the lorry size, right? The lorry size is calibrated to bridges, and the bridges are actually historically calibrated to all the way back to Roman times. So it's a really beautiful story where they said, the size of a rocket actually in NASA was calibrated all the way through to the bridge sizes of Roman bridges, because we were living with the legacy of those supply chains. So what you see is that there's these invisible frameworks, and standards are one dimension, or even the idea of property and property rights. So if you draw a red line boundary around your property, that property sits on a registry. Now, you understanding your red line boundary is an idea of divisibility. Whereas actually, if you own a cherry tree, your cherry tree is dependent on somebody else's cherry tree for fertilization, right? So you don't see the relationalities. You don't see the flows of water. So again, our logics of how we've constructed the boundary creates an illusion of the world around us. Our theories of, like we say, you have, the example I often use is that if you own a house, you own that house and you think, over the last 10 years, maybe your house's value has gone up 3, 4, 5 times, 10 years. If you take that house and you move it to Siberia, what's it worth? Nothing. Because the house value comes from its monopolistic relationship to common goods. Air quality, light quality, labor market, schools, culture, transportation, food security, energy security, all these common goods. What's happened is those common goods have inflated in value and they've been privatized in the hands of the property owner. So how you see the world around you is rooted in these logics. So we've assumed that the property value is mine, but actually when you look at it, it's different. So we became obsessed by the world behind the world that we physically see. We were building 3D printed homes. And what became apparent was that if you wanted to build 3D printed homes, well, you needed a form of warranty, because without warranting those homes, you wouldn't get a mortgage. So if you don't have a warranty, you can't get a mortgage. But if you're going to warranty that home, you have to create the standards and the infrastructures for local materials to be used by local contractors. You have to create a quality control mechanism that allows for that variation. So it was easy to construct the home, but the challenge, or the decentralized production, but the real challenge was actually the warranty infrastructure. How do you create assembly warranty infrastructures? Then the real challenge was, how do you finance, how do you create mortgages around that? So what we started to realize was the world around us was constructed in these logics. And I could create a warranty structure which is around standardization and centralization of quality control. So if I centralize quality control, I thereby define what is the right material, and thereby I've controlled the possibility of that. Whereas there's other ways of designing that standardization and the quality control that allows for parametric standards and variation. If I do that, then I allow for local supply chains, local providers, local material use and variation. And this is something that's became really important to us, that it was really clear that the world around us was a function of these logics. Procurement, boring things, procurement, all the way through to contract theory, how we argue contracts. These are constructing the world around us. Our contracts are based on adversarial relationships. But the reality is I may optimize for myself at the harm of not you, but the people around you. That invisible harm actually is part of my problem long term. So how do you build a contract not on transactional optimization to one person, but a relationship of care? So how do you reimagine the contract to be a contract of care? It's a fundamentally different type of contracting. And there's some brilliant work going on around conscious contracting and systemic contracting, and we're doing work around many-to-many contracting. So that was basically it. What we started to realize was the implied world we see around us. So physically, you could pretty much look at everything around us and see behind it all the code that constructs it. And to change the world that we need to change, you have to recode all that code. Whether it's ownership, materiality, standards, how we own materials, all these are code. Let's reimagine. So I think the first thing is that, yes, so dark matter labs, we have lawyers, we have finance people, we have anthropologists, we have coders, So one, I think the 21st century design studio has to be really deeply transdisciplinary. It's no longer got a structural engineer, you're transdisciplinary. To be deeply systemically. Secondly, I do think design is really critical, because design is about the synthesis of the new. And I think one of the most amazing things about design education is it trains you to synthesize new. And this is, I think, the key skills. Whereas management and analysis. Analysis is about analyzing and comprehending the world. Management is about managing and cohering the world. Design is about the synthesizing and the creation of the new and the possible. And those are three different types of worldviews, but also capabilities. And this is where I think design as a tool and as a capability is going to be such a vital skill in this 21st century. I think the challenge for design has been reduced to consultancy. And in that act, it has become part of a chain which is further down the theory of value. So design is usually now employed only when somebody understands what the problem is. But actually the real value of design is actually as a partner, when you're trying to actually not only re-understand the problem, but redefine the problem to actually change the solution space. And that requires a different theory of where design sits, and the economy of design has to be reimagined for that worldview. My optimism comes from a very simple thing, that I'm no longer arguing from a position of morality. I think we are fundamentally living in entanglements. I think climate breakdown is a symptom of the failure, not the failure itself. It's a symptom of a failure to understand we live in entangled realities. Our externalities are no longer ignorable. I'm sitting in a moment where I look at the world and say, command and control as a means of organizing the world is no longer either efficient or effective as a means of organizing. So if you're going to organize in a complex, entangled world, your theory of organizing has to be rooted through learning. And it has to be rooted through re-agentifying the world, recognizing the agency and the agency of care, creativity of the world as a whole, human and non-human and machine systems. So I think when I look deeply into the system, this isn't a moral argument. It's a functional argument, but a new class of functionality which releases a new efficacy argument, which is where I have hope. So, this can sit there and think, oh, well, it's a lovely story. But the reality is, I think we're reaching the limits of command and control as a means of organizing. And this can apply all the way through, property theory all the way through. And the other part of it that gives me hope is that I would say, a year ago or 2 years ago, we were entertainment. Indy, come here, have a chat. And it's lovely to, hear your thoughts. And we've gone from being entertainment to working with some of the most interesting and critical industries in the world, whether it's banks and other actors recognizing we're going to see a new class of assets in the world, a new class of re-agentification, a new class of finance as a result of that, and a new class of contracting. And we're working on all those things. So, and for me, the design of a next generation of agents in the world, next generation of contracting, next generation of governance, next generation of financing, that puts us smack bang in the middle of that reality. And being able to build that, I think, is extraordinary. So I suppose I don't sit here with a kind of with a kind of moral theory behind this. I think this is the only way to do it.